We're live. All right, welcome everybody. It's Wednesday, February 25th, and it's the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. I'm Rep. Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Richard Bailey, Lamar 2. Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Garrett Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Cliffner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spilia, Wyndham 2.
Great. And joining us today.
I'm Stephen Olson. I'm president of the board of Washington Cooperative.
Great.
Gabrielle Molina with Dallas Rapper Markets.
Dana Lee Perry, New Fastener. TJ Ford, Public Service Department.
Ken Nolan, Vermont Public Power Supply Authority.
Andrea Cohn from My Electric Cooperative.
Great.
Great favor with PUC.
Zoe, intern for Rebecca White.
Candace Morgan, Piedmont Power. Lisa Morris, Vermont Electric Co-op.
Jones with Keith Hammond.
Great. All right. So we are here to spend a couple hours taking testimony on H 716, an act relating to the net metering formula. And Representative Morrow has revised the bill, and it is posted in the bill folder. Why don't we all just take a quick look and have Rep. Morrow walk us through his changes. So that is in H 716, drafts, implements, and legal documents. And it's draft 1.1 dated February 23rd. All right. Chris, why don't you tell us about your changes?
Okay, section 1 change capping the negative rate adjuster, just adding some language for the PUC to consider in their biannual rate considerations. Section 2 is unchanged. Section 3 is came out of our discussions about tying incentives for battery storage to better utilize distributed solar systems. And so this was designed to incentivize battery systems being tied to net metered solar systems.
Okay, so in looking at what's new, the new language is additional considerations for the PUC to take into account when they're looking at net metering compensation rates. And there's a suggested new adjuster or category for battery. And then the freeze is gone, but the behind the meter language remains the same, right?
Correct.
Okay. All righty, so we're going to get feedback on this new language from our witnesses this morning. So I believe first up is Mr. Faber from the PUC.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Greg Faber with PUC. Here to speak about H 716 this morning. So we don't support this bill. It would be hard for us to imagine a bill that would more effectively transfer money from low and moderate income ratepayers to for-profit companies and wealthier ratepayers. So having said that, I'll go through the parts of the bill that are problematic. Beginning on page 1, let's see, section D1. It has us considering the presence of or absence of federal tax credit. That's something we would already do. We already factor in the cost of systems, and tax credits would affect the costs. So we already look at that sort of thing. The second part, though, is a little problematic. The impact on jobs in Vermont. We don't look at electric rates as an economic development fund. If this committee wants to do something about creating jobs in a certain sector of the economy, that should be an economic development bill. with broad-based taxes to support that. It shouldn't be done through electric rates. The rest of these things, we're already looking at that in our biennial reviews. Now, if you move on to page 2, part 2 here. This part, this is a little confusing. This says explicitly there shall be no adjuster on behind the meter consumption. But then if you go down to line 1 of part 3, it says create an adjuster for behind the meter consumption batteries. We can't do both. And when you get to part 3, this part is really hard to understand. I'm not sure where this goal of 50 megawatts per year of new energy storage came from. It seems to us to be an unrealistic goal. And there's no end date either. This would be 50 megawatts a year of new solar storage for net metered devices for forever. We don't think that's realistic. It would involve creating massive incentives to do that. And that would exacerbate the cost shift that I talked about earlier from low income and moderate ratepayers to wealthier ratepayers in for-profit companies. So no, we don't support this. I also had a question about this last part on lines 11 and 12, where it talks about third-party virtual power plant providers. There's no definition of that. I don't know what that is. So no, we don't support this. And I'm happy to answer any questions. But...
Yeah, Greg Klippner.
So setting aside some of the technical concerns that you raised, can you comment on the general concept of not charging consumers for power they generate behind the meter and use behind the meter that never hits the grid?
Comment on it?
I mean, in general, is that?
You could certainly do that.
Yes.
One way to do it would be to eliminate any compensation for excess generation. That would incentivize people to use their power behind the meter and store it.
So there's nothing no unintended consequences or inherently negative about people generate juice on the roof, they use it in their house, never hits the grid, they don't get charged for that.
Not inherently. It depends how you set up the incentive system to do so.
Great.
The way this is written, I don't know, that would be
Thank you.
How would you write it?
How would I write it?
Mhm.
I wouldn't have a bill at all. I would allow us to go through a biennial process like we normally do. I've commented on that before. Why not let us do our process, see where the rates come out? And if there's something we're missing, something specific, please tell us. But this body, the legislature, has tried to set rates in the past. It hasn't worked out well, but you can do that. You have the authority to do that. But you decided a few years back to put this in our hands because we have necessary expertise to do that. So I would not do this bill at all.
I guess what I meant was, and then maybe, I don't know, for more of those questions. I guess what I meant was, if there's nothing inherently, dangerous about incentivizing people to,
You could certainly ask us to
generate and
consider.
use, then that would be a PUC rulemaking process that we would.
Not a rulemaking process. Again, it's a biennial audit
Yeah, I'm
of the
sorry.
rates.
Okay. And so I guess what I'm asking is, what would you need from us in order for the PUC, when it considers the rates, to dive into that topic more thoroughly?
Nothing.
Or see some progress there?
We don't need anything. We would consider that already. People could bring those concerns to the audit,
Mhm.
and we would consider those.
But it hasn't been the result in the past, right? So,
Well, I think there has been a lot of storage. And you'll hear from the utilities later on that they have programs themselves which encourage storage and allow them to control that. That's a much better approach.
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Rep. Clipper.
So right now, people generating behind the meter and using behind the meter are charged per kilowatt hour.
Well, there's a blended rate, yeah, and that has adjusters in it. Yep.
So I think this is a slightly separate issue from storage, which is I can look at my app now and see how much my panels are producing and how much is going into the house and how much is going into the grid.
Mhm.
And I think what we're trying to get at is, I'm going to use my favorite example and apologize for people who've heard that. If I were to grow tomatoes in my garden and pick one and take it into my kitchen and slice it and eat it, I would be irritated if someone charged me for doing it. And it feels like we are growing electrons on our roofs, we are using them in our kitchen, and we are being charged for doing that.
Oh,
And we are trying to figure out a way to avoid that, just that little part of the problem. And that could include storage or it could not include storage, either way. But it's sort of a conceptual question of behind the meter generation and behind the meter use. What's the fair way to treat that?
Here are the adjusters we put on blended residential rate. But that we already have in place. That's the fair way to do it. I mean, you may not think it's fair. But that's the way we look at it. That those are our mechanisms to control that and try to make it fair.
All right, thank you.
Rep. Morrow.
No question.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm just trying to get at, I understand the logic of the PUC setting the rates. I'm not arguing that. I think what I'm trying to find my way around is, the PUC engaging in that expert process and coming up with a result in the behind the meter category that doesn't feel fair. And so we're asking, do you see any solution there besides us just saying, gosh, I wish that would be different?
I mean, you could certainly ask us to consider that in any biennial audit.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was asking earlier. I'm definitely not trying to be combative. It's like, well, how do we try to see some progress in a very specific area that we've identified?
Yeah.
So asking you to consider it in your next review would be a way.
Yeah, and we consider it.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, Rep. Allen?
Would it be fair to say that if using the rates in place now, the -4 cents, if the behind the meter negative adjuster didn't apply to electricity that was consumed behind the meter, then the negative adjuster for the exported energy would go up?
Yeah, probably. But there's other mechanisms we could use as well. You could eliminate all the consumption, all the compensation for excess generation. And then anything behind the meter would be offsetting full retail rates.
Does it not now?
With the adjusters, you have to add the adjusters in.
Confused with the calculation. So you just wouldn't get any compensation for anything excess? There's no.
That's one way to encourage behind the meter consumption and storage. Because you wouldn't get anything for excess. So why produce it?
So these are new systems going forward. All the systems that exist today, stay grandfathered.
Again, it's one way to address that problem.
Do we have any more questions for Mr. Faber?
Thank
Greg, thank you for being here.
Yep, thank you.
Alrighty. Mr. Knowlton, are,
Okay. Oh, wait, Lisa, let me do it again.
Support.
That's support. Now,
are you scared to share your screen?
I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Let's put this, see if I can put it on a slideshow. Okay. Well, my name is Steve Knowlton. I'm president of the board of Washington Electric Cooperative. I spoke with you about a week and a half ago on the same subject. As you'll recall, the board of an electric co-op, which is a public power utility, is in effect a regulatory body. We act on behalf of our member owners to make sure they get equitable attention, equitable benefits from the investments they put into the co-op that they own. So in effect, they are our investors. So I'm speaking on behalf of them. Mr. Faber has set up the challenges, I think, quite fairly and adequately. So I think my testimony could be brief. I'm just reiterating what the three questions are that came in the revised bill. First was to consider the externalities of net metering to see if there should be adjusters to the regulatory process for those. And secondly, just to eliminate the negative adjuster on behind the meter consumption. And the third issue was to create a new adjuster. And then get to these one by one. I should probably say at the beginning that I largely do not support this bill for the same reasons I spoke of a week and a half when I was here. Concerning the external effects, first of all, with the loss of the federal credits, obviously that's important to the economics of net metering, but ratepayers are also stressed as almost all utilities are experiencing rising costs. So any further subsidization of net metering to offset lack of state and federal support is basically at further ratepayer expense. That does not seem fair to us. Federal actions have also hampered utilities in procuring renewable energy for their customers. So utilities themselves are under an economic bind to what they're supposed to be doing. All the other effects listed in the revised bill are already included for consideration by the PUC biennial process. So I don't think there's anything I can add to Mr. Faber's discussion at that point. One point I'd like to add with regard to the idea that net metering is going to be beneficial to the renewability of Vermont's portfolio. The Renewable Energy Standard in Vermont, which has been passed by the legislature, it requires utilities to achieve pretty stringent renewability measures. And this includes in-state generation within a fairly short period, 4 years. While this didn't happen in our territory, I read about in Vermont Digger about the array in Lowell that's being proposed to be built. It's a 5 megawatt array, and it's of some concern to people. And in the article in Vermont Digger, it said that this array would support 1,500 homes. So that's or over 1,500 homes, and that's an equivalent way of saying you could replace this with 1,500 rooftop solar systems. Well, that in itself, 1,500 is 500 more than Washington Electric already has on its system, with 10% of its members being net meters. Build out such an array in 4 years, you'd have to be installing one array per day. Now until 4 years, until the utility was required to have to be able to meet the renewability standard. So a lot of utilities are really under a lot of pressure to get things done to be able to meet law set by the legislature. And net metering is just not a particularly appropriate. It's not certainly not cheaper, and it's not faster by any means. So the utilities are under the gun to actually meet the provisions of the renewable energy standard. This slide I got from it's a summary slide to give us an idea of what's driving costs in rates today. And I got this from a Lawrence Berkeley laboratory Bradley group analysis paper. It's not that it's not numerical, but it does indicate that utility wind and solar basically lower the cost of electricity. This is based on analysis all around the country. So, Vermont may be different, but basically utility wind and solar lower the cost of electricity. It's stated that state renewable portfolio policies might raise it to some extent, but I'm a researcher. I sort of dived into this a little bit more. I've come to further articles which show that actually state renewable policies do not, on their own, the fact that you have a renewable energy standard or renewable policy portfolio, they do not in themselves raise the cost of electricity. It's how you implement them that might raise the cost of electricity. And in every study I've seen, net metered solar is a big factor in raising the cost of electricity for all ratepayers. So I want to just leave that cost factor is one of the drivers for why this part one of this bill did not resonate with me.
Could we stop? Sorry, could you just go back for a second?
Sure.
To the slide?
To the slide, yeah,
Okay, slide.
or not move on, I guess. That's a really interesting slide, and it raises a question I wanted to ask you about your previous slide, but you don't need to go back there. Which is that I think as a committee, what we're trying to grapple with is there any low barrier or low hanging fruit way to try to find some path forward that makes it slightly less onerous or slightly more attractive for Vermonters to put solar on their rooftops. Because we've taken testimony, and it's been interesting to learn that the utility scale solar is cheaper and drives greater savings, but we see siting. I think we're seeing a lot of siting barriers with that. So it's like that's the way to do it money wise, but nobody wants to put it anywhere. And so I keep then thinking about, well, nobody cares if I put an array on my garage, but it's become financially impossible for anybody. But as we mentioned earlier, you have to be now you have to be able to afford to do that in a way that wasn't previously the case. And I'm really sensitive to the argument that we shouldn't be asking, ratepayers to cover huge cost shifts, but if they're very small incremental cost shifts that just help it pencil out for more people, wouldn't just the behind the meter, wouldn't just that small step be low barrier? And so that's where I'm curious about the last, whether we couldn't expand the geographic breadth and the residential uptake on that for a much smaller cost shift. So I'm just curious, that's a really cool slide, I think. So I was just curious to get your thoughts on that.
It's a great question.
It seems like we've abandoned everything else, except for just this one idea.
Mhm. It's a great question. If I had the answer, I would be sure to tell you.
Okay.
But it is, I think in our previous meeting, I think Ms. Morgan from GMP offered, the way forward, which is if you feel this is an important path to go down, then funds should be coming from the state through progressive income taxes for this process. I mean, because I think as the previous speaker, Mr. Faber said, this is not really a issue of energy reliability, efficiency, and cost that utilities are required, that regulated utilities are required to adhere to. So if there are issues beyond that, so if you could articulate, I'm speaking generally, not to you, but if one can articulate, what the benefits of having small scale solar are, then that would be a path forward for, if there's be a group that could say, here's why this is really worth doing. My take is that net metering was intended to develop the jump started. And thanks to the jump start, utility scale solar is cheap, which is great. I mean, that's why the legislature undertook this 30 years ago. And to its credit.
Okay.
But no jump start lasts forever, in my opinion. Or should it last forever? I mean, times change, things work out, and people evolve. But I admit that it's a good question. I've thought about it since our last meeting. But I don't have an obvious answer for you this time.
Okay, thanks.
Other than
Right.
we need to find a way to express the value in that, and then act on that. My opinion. Since we can't really express it.
Yeah, and I wasn't laughing rudely about the income tax. Hey, I voted for I voted for it more than once, but I think other people would be in line for those revenues.
Okay. Well, as for the behind the meter consumption adjuster, I mean, one could always do that. You can have a separate adjuster for behind the meter power and export power. You can argue that that it's already been done in this committee, that a separate adjuster on behind the meter power could increase the value of the array to the owner. In other words, you could get behind the meter compensation effectively at the retail rate if you used all the power that you produced on site. And if paired with a local battery, you could probably even get additional benefit from time of use rates. In other words, you program your battery to discharge when power is that get from the grid is expensive, and the less power that's exported to the grid, the reduction of cost shift to the ratepayer. However, I would argue that even if the adjuster for the power consumed behind the meter is eliminated, the PUC still has to have the flexibility of setting the overall adjusters, the exported power, protect the ratepayer. So I give as an example here, it's just not analysis, but now the adjuster is 4 cents for all power. And let's just assume that 80% is exported, because that's a typical amount for our array. 20 to 30% is consumed behind the array, even though we've got these things power mostly car chargers at the present time. No one seems to want to charge their car at noon when they're at work. So you could certainly conceive of an adjuster of 0 cents for behind the meter, and then you increase the adjuster or make it more negative for power that's exported. In other words, you still have the same motivation, but here there's you'd still be paying the same amount, but should be motivated to not export your power. This is equivalent to what's called net billing, as opposed to net energy metering, which is what Vermont typically has. It's followed by a number of states have this. New Hampshire, I looked up a New Hampshire electric cooperative bill. Their retail rate is 22 cents, and they get a credit for exported power of 13 cents. So in effect, as Mr. Fable was saying, you could do an adjustment of all this to essentially arrive at a situation where you could export power would be credited at certainly less than retail rates. And it's possible, it's been done. I would be loath to actually recommend putting this in legal words at this time. I think it would be a good topic for discussion. Going through rate design processes around the boardroom, I've learned it's a very, very complicated process, and it should not be done lightly. So ideas can come up on the table, talked about, but actually deciding on a rate design is a pretty important process. It kind of signals a lot of the values that you have. And so doing it right is important. And I think that's why suggesting it to the PUC, as you suggested, was a possibility. And it's well within their, I think they could consider it. I hesitate to put it myself. I cannot recommend putting it in legal language now until it's really been examined. As for the third one, I have to say I didn't really understand when I read the bill. I didn't really understand what it was getting at. I got the impression that it was an attempt to have an extra credit for solar arrays that would deliver power to a battery owned by someone else. And I'm not sure I really grasped the full nuances of the idea. But again, I would argue that would be something that would be premature to put into legal language at this point. So basically my conclusion is that, as much as we might like small scale net metered systems, are no longer as relevant to solving the state's energy, affordable energy and environmental challenges. People net meter primarily because it indeed saves them money. It does that. After a certain number of years, you've paid off your investment in it through reduced rates. It will save you money on your electric bills. But that's not, it does so at the expense of the ratepayer. Now, just to echo your point, Chairman, residential systems serving a single home or local group can still be of interest to many. And there could be adjuster price structures in the existing process that could greater encourage the local consumption of electricity. I don't think anybody in the room would complain if someone put up a solar array at their house, put a battery there, and used all the power that they generated at their house, as long as it's connected to the grid safely. It's still a free country. You should be free to generate and use your own power. It's exporting the power that is causing the challenge, the problems that you hear about. And it's not really evident to me that should we proceed down that line, that the electric ratepayer should remain the appropriate donor to support the incentivization of continuing net meter program as it exists now. So with these comments, I would just say I largely don't support the bill as written, but I agree that it raises some interesting ideas.
Thank you. Do we have questions from Mr. Norton? Yeah.
A quick one on that last point. You say exporting is the problem. The whole premise behind virtual power plants is that you're exporting to benefit other ratepayers, the grid stability, load management, all that sort of thing, peak shaving. And the whole premise behind these programs, which from what I hear, has been very successful, is that you're using exported power to the benefit of the system. Is that accurate?
In a way, if you export power when the power is needed, then it can be a benefit.
Right, that's what we're talking about, yeah.
Current net metering does not export power when it's needed.
Well, but with this number 3, and when we're talking about adding batteries to the system, that's the whole premise of the VPPs, right? So it's exported at peak times under control of the utilities for common benefit. Okay, so exporting can be beneficial under certain circumstances.
Of course,
Oh, okay. Well, it sounded like you were saying exporting was
exporting,
in itself problematic.
under the present net metering law, it is, in my opinion, and it definitely leads to cost shift to other ratepayers. But clearly, in a future system in which we have, if we have batteries, you have the possibility of, and it doesn't require net meter power, but you have the ability to control when power is flowing on the grid and when it's not, and so you can more optimally use the equipment of the grid. And ideally, you can minimize, and you can reduce the cost of maintaining the grid if you use it more efficiently. And I agree that all these are tasks that utilities and will be pursuing the next decades. So it's the problem is with the current net metering law, not with it. The idea that you can have people bring power on the grid. Generally utilities are very conscious to dispatching power when it's needed and not dispatching power when it's not. And current net metering law is not distinguished really, doesn't really account for that need.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed the example you gave in New Hampshire, the retail rate was 22 cents. What they're paying for net metered power is 13 cents, so a negative adjuster of 9 cents. I did a quick search. It looks like the wholesale cost of power in New Hampshire is 12.6 cents. So the exported price is essentially wholesale. And while I'm not advocating this, is it true that if we were paying wholesale for exported power, that would eliminate the cost shift?
Representative, I'm probably not the best person to ask about that.
Are you the best person in the room?
I mean, I think that I would actually probably defer to Mr. Faber, who's done this, but the idea is, I mean, it seems reasonable to me that if you export power and are compensated at a wholesale rate or whatever the wholesale rate is at the time it's exported, because as you know, if you export power on noon on a June day, the wholesale rate at that time is probably not going to be 12 cents because there's a glut of power. In fact, as we found in the CI region, when there's overabundance of solar power, cost of electricity can actually be negative. In other words, you actually have to pay to put power on the grid. So I don't know. It sounds as difficult to me as milk pricing, but I just don't think it does depend on when you are on the grid. But I understand your question. I think that the general answer is yes. If net meters got compensated at the wholesale rate at the time, and that would be a reasonable approach to ask the PUC to consider.
Thank you.
But I think it's premature for him to declare that.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Knowlton. Andrea,
Lisa's going to join at the same time.
great.
Thank you.
Morning, for the record, Andrea Cohen with Vermont Electric Cooperative. With me is Lisa Morris, our subject matter expert who spoke to the committee, what was it last week?
Yeah.
And she'll give the bulk of the testimony, and she's the one that will answer the hard questions, because this is what she lives and breathes every day.
Right.
But I did just want to offer a few quick comments, for the record, just to share that we are opposed to this bill. We regret to inform you, we are opposed to this bill. These issues, as the questions that are being asked, it's really complicated, and it really requires, very thorough analysis and thoughtful analysis. And that's why you gave this to the PUC. As you've been hearing, of course, you can give them some direction, but we've been trying to come up with an analogy about tomatoes, and it's not working. Because it's so much more complicated than, today, if you needed your tomatoes, you'd get maybe 4% of what you need. Right, as Lisa's charts showed you last time about usage and when you're generating, when you need. So it's not as simple as I want a tomato, I have tomatoes. It's really a complicated system. Maybe you've come up with an analogy while you're sitting here that you can offer in your comments. As we read this draft, we're just seeing a lot more questions than answers. So again, that's why we're not supportive of the bill. I do want to just make one comment before I hand it to Lisa about section 1. We are very opposed to the PUC considering job creation as part of setting rates. If jobs are created because we're, deploying renewable energy, whether net metering or through the res, great benefit, great ancillary benefit. But to ask electric ratepayers through rates to in some way contribute to the job creation in a particular sector just really hits us very wrong. Take that across the hall. It's like if we want to do something for this sector, there's other ways to maybe approach it in the Economic Development Committee as a jobs creation initiative, but we really feel like it should not be part of net metering or res or anything else. The job creation, again, it's great if it happens, but shouldn't be the goal. And with that, sections 2 and 3 and other things, Lisa will hit.
So one of my roles at the co-op is to implement net metering in our billing. And if I were to implement section 2, I would just have a lot of questions about what specifically the language it means in terms of how we're going to bill net metering. So the language that there shall be no adjuster on behind the meter consumption. Just curious, and I'm not really asking you this, but is this prospective? Is this for all of our adjusters that we've implemented over the years? We have many different categories of siting adjusters and timeframes. So, is this only moving forward, or is this kind of looking at everything? And then the way that it's written, it seems to be both positive and negative adjusters. It doesn't, speak to simply negative.
So could you talk a little bit more about the prospective versus, you just mentioned that you have many different, and you talk about that a little bit more, please.
So under the current net metering structure, we've been implementing it for applications starting on January 1st of 2017. And initially, most of the adjusters were positive, meaning that if you generated a kilowatt hour, you got maybe 3 or 4 cents as a credit for those kilowatt hours. And then at a certain point, somewhere around 2020, 2021, some of them became 0. And so there was no adjuster in either direction. And then at a certain point, they became a negative adjuster. So we're actually charging 1 cent, 2 cents, currently 4 cents for the typical net metering system. And so there are adjusters that flow in both directions. And the way that it has typically worked for the net metering rules is you get the deal that you signed up for when you signed up for it. And then new changes, the changes that go into effect are just for new applicants. And so they don't change everybody else. So just the way that this language is written, to me is pretty unclear as far as what that means for everybody who has already signed up for net metering in the past.
I wasn't ever envisioning that it would be retroactive. But that's just me. Okay, thanks.
And then for the behind the meter language, so means electricity that is used or stored on site without first passing through the retail electricity provider's electric meter, otherwise reaching the grid. So the way that we currently do net metering is it's a monthly netting. And so we're looking at your end of the meter reading, we're looking at your beginning of the meter reading, and we're either charging you or we're crediting you appropriately. This language seems to me to be looking at it more maybe on an hourly time frame. And so it's those kilowatt hours. It's only the kilowatt hours that are used on site and not the kilowatt hours that are being delivered to the grid, and for that hourly basis. So this would be, in my opinion, a completely new billing setup that we would be implementing, is looking at that on an hourly basis rather than a monthly basis, which I think we could do it. I don't know that you could actually do this statewide, because you would need automated metering infrastructure to be able to know what those hourly readings are. And, some utilities are just doing, again, that end of the month, beginning of the month, and don't have that data to be able to implement this kind of billing scheme. And then to go back to the, I guess the tomato analogy, one of the points that we brought up last time is that a lot of our fixed costs are actually in our energy rates. So, I love a summer tomato. We have about 25 garden beds at our house. It's one of the wonderful things about summer. But I think that net metering is very different in that it requires somebody else to build, maintain, and operate the grid in order to produce and deliver those kilowatt hours. So it becomes a little bit different if you have a battery. You can, produce and store some of your own hours. Almost nobody actually does own use with their batteries. They're still sending those kilowatt hours out onto the grid when they're generating them. And then in the event of an outage, you could be self-sufficient for a period of time. Definitely not year round in the state of Vermont if you paired solar with batteries. So then just moving on to section 3. Again, just to echo Mr. Faber's comments, we don't know where the 50 megawatt hours came from. We do view batteries as a grid asset, and we are investing in utility scale batteries. And we also have an incentive program for members who install batteries where we're valuing that peak shaving capacity that they provide to our system. And so pairing it with solar from our perspective really doesn't have any additional grid benefit for us. It's really the battery that provides that value. And like I said, we do have an incentive program for that.
And on that, we were wondering, how would that integrate with different utilities, have different incentive programs? How would a statewide incentive, would we all stop doing our own? That's why this is complicated. Because each utility has different incentives, and frankly, we know best the value to us from those batteries. That's why we go through rate setting around coming up with our incentive, because we know if we can manage that battery 3 times a month and use it for peak shaving, it's worth X amount to us, and then we compensate the member that way. I don't know how we would integrate with a PUC process to provide another incentive, because the incentive might be really different depending where you live and things like that.
Rick Kemp.
Yeah, just a quick question on your battery program. Does that allow members to use the electricity in the batteries themselves, not just in an outage situation?
Absolutely. The battery is theirs. They own it in our program. And so if they choose to, they can sign up for our program where we get to use it a handful of hours a year for peak shaving. And then we offer an incentive.
But otherwise they have access to it. So in the summer when the sun's shining, they can charge the battery, and then at night they can use that power in their own house.
If they could, yeah. That's like a self-consumption setting, which most people don't do that, but they could.
They could.
Mhm.
Just curious. Thank you.
And do you know why most people don't do that?
Because there's really no value to doing it. You're cycling your battery more than you would otherwise. And you're still connected to the grid. So you can get, the energy that anybody would, whether or not you have a battery. And so from a customer perspective, there's really not much that you're getting unless.
Are there not time of use rates in your territory?
We do have time of use rates. Yeah. So, but Yeah, nobody really uses it that way to date. I'd have to think about that more to think if that would be beneficial because our peak time is 5 to 9 p.m. So if you were discharging your battery, then yeah, theoretically, I suppose you should be running.
If people charge up during the day, discharge from 5 to 9 and we make everybody happy.
You know, the thing is, people just want to turn the light, you know, most people are not looking to manage that, you know, they're getting food on the table, kids out before late. You have to be pretty geeky to really want to manage that because the cost savings just would not be.
Well, they're getting power from their battery instead of buying it from the utility, so.
But they bought it. Don't they buy it from the system? I mean, when they're recharging their battery, they're buying it. So they're already buying it. Maybe explain it. Net metering people are still on the system. I mean,
Right. I mean, if you have net metering, even if you're paired with a battery, you're still fully connected to the grid. I mean, it'll isolate from the grid in an event without
And
it.
there's a meter on the solar panel, so they're paying for every kilowatt that they generate.
They're paying the siting adjuster if they
Yes.
have that current, right? If they applied at a time when there was a siting adjuster.
Can you just give me an approximate cost, what it would cost to put in a battery system with tied into your solar? What part, how much is that investment?
It's if you're doing, so most people do 2 batteries. It's about $25,000 with the batteries plus the installation.
And are those in the house or are they outside?
Most of them are in the house. You can install them outside, but most people install them in the home. Yeah.
Thank you.
So your system peak is between 5 and 9. And used to be system peak was midday 10 to 2. So intermittent generation, be it solar or wind, is shifting that peak to the evening. Correct? Is there enough solar production during the day whenever that peak occurs? I was assuming winter peak now, but maybe summer peak. Is there enough solar and wind generation to still continue to shift that, what I would assume to be an industrial load, to get that peak into the evening consumption, which I would consider residential load?
Well, what we've seen over the past year is that our peaks do tend to be after the solar generation drops off. So like 7 p.m., 6 p.m., something like that. We've actually seen some in the morning, which is unprecedented. So that's a new phenomenon in Vermont. And that does have to do with a distributed generation that's on the system, as well as some of the flexible load programs. And so that shifting peaks around as well within the state. So it's all becoming less predictable, honestly. It's becoming a tougher job to be able to anticipate when those peak events are going to be. But across the board, I did look at actually the last year of peaks in preparation for this. And they're universally after, either before the solar has started for the day or after solar has stopped producing.
Even on the cloudy and rainy days, there is some distributed generation or solar or wind that's coming on, renewable, some sort of renewable that's coming on to keep that shift, or you've shifted your load management through your customers.
Yes.
it is a complicated time because also with more EVs coming on it's a really, that's why when we say this is complicated, we're not kidding in terms of like what the value is to us.
Yeah, but I look at getting up in the morning and taking that EV and driving to work, so I'm not connected to my solar panel during the day, and I'm connected when I have to have my car home to charge it.
Right.
I'll have to let that on extension cord.
It's a little too slow for practical. So we're happy to come back or be available as you think through this. Was there anything else you wanted to share? Right. I know, we had slides. We didn't bring them today because we just had short notice on getting
It's okay.
the language, but, referring back to Lisa's slides from last week, there's a lot of good information
Yep.
there about like generation and
Great.
thank you.
All right. Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Appreciate it.
Good morning, Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power. Consistent with what you've heard from other witnesses, we're also not in support of the bill in the revised language before you today. And really want to emphasize, similar to what I had shared last time, that I think the biennial review process as it exists right now is rigorous and evidence-based, and the PUC does a good job of pulling in the various considerations that are out there on this program, including balancing those cost pressures and what it means for the overall industry, as well as external factors and market conditions and changes to pricing and all that. So that's a process that has felt very, at this point, well established. And should be allowed to continue as it exists, started already, right? In terms of, because of the timing of this conversation. And a lot of, like I said, they're already required to weigh a wide range of factors. I think that additionally, as you heard, and especially from BEC, some of the other parts of the bill as drafted would be pretty big changes to kind of how the program is structured and what it's looking to achieve. I want to correct slightly what Mr. Knowlton referred back to what I had said before. My suggestion at the time, last time, was around a tax credit. Because, especially if you're thinking about economic development and some of these other concerns, that's really not a place to be done through the electric customers that are paying for additional costs here. Vermont already has very progressive income tax, so I wasn't going to get into the tax structure, but that's a broader like conversation about how we're paying for this, and having it not just be electric customers who are the ones that are paying for the incentives that are out there right now. I think, and so I would echo what you heard from Andrea on the economic development considerations as well, just not being the right place for that discussion. Also, as we had talked about, and you've heard from other witnesses, in an increasingly renewable environment in terms of what the requirements are on utilities already, there are more cost-effective ways to deploy renewable energy across the state. And that is both through, the ones that we are required to procure under Tier 2, but it can also be some of the programs that I spoke about last time and that you saw referenced in the PUC's Act 142 report, which is ACRE, the Affordable Community Renewable Energy Program. That was obviously paid for by general fund dollars, but it does provide a direct connection to income eligible customers to get connected to an array and see some of those benefits on their bill through a reduction in what they're paying. So I just think that, if the goal is to connect more folks directly with solar, there are other ways to do that than just through the net metering program. And continue to show that there is other options out there. I echo the concerns and questions that were raised too by both Lisa and Andrea from Vermont Electric Co-op on sort of what time frame would be considered in that the second part of the bill change around the export and use. It's a little opaque at the moment. And I also think that I understand the goal, and also certainly trying to align your own usage with when you're generating and all of that as well. But it's all a little bit more complicated, and everyone is not to continue the tomato metaphor, but like you got to make sure that you have what you need to keep the lights on, and that might not be at the same time that the solar is producing. And so it is all just quite a bit more complicated than gardening or tomato metaphors. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sorry for it to be so brief, but we were just kind of responding in real time to the update. So largely my testimony from the last time remains consistent here as well.
Any questions for Candace?
I'm gonna have to add canning tomatoes and a root cellar to my metaphor here.
Maybe. I mean, the other thing that I was toying with it, as everyone I think has been leading up to today. And, you know, in addition to the, when you're using it, how you're storing it, all of that, you know, the compensation is also a factor. And so you're producing one tomato, but you're getting paid for 2 or 3, right? Just based on how the crediting system and other things are working as well. And those are costs that are paid for by your neighbors and the other customers as well. So, but we can do a lot of tomato. Yeah, it's potentially I wanted to. We're made it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm good with the tomato thing. Yeah.
Moratorium from the chair.
Perfect. I'm happy to be a part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Find out more.
All right. Candace, thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ken.
Good morning. I will avoid tomato analogies.
I mean, you know,
We're gonna start throwing tomatoes.
you're already ready. Yeah.
Good morning. For the record, Ken Nolan, I'm the general manager of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. It's always nice to be the last utility to speak because my testimony is largely ditto. I agree with what the others have said, particularly Lisa as a practitioner of how this actually works. Her testimony really resonated with me, and you'll hear similar themes in what I'm going to be talking about. I need to start with our position on net metering overall. We continue to believe that net metering benefits affluent customers at the expense of low income and moderate income customers. So we start our entire conversation around that understanding and belief. I also need to say, I spent a lot of time talking to other joint action agencies, utilities around the country. Vermont's net metering law is the most complicated in the country. We have separate adjusters for locations, timing, grandfathering for 10 years, but then you go on to the new rules after 10 years. The billing companies that try to set this up so that utilities can bill their customers can't figure out how to do it. But every time the legislature makes a change, we spend thousands of dollars programming or reprogramming the billing systems. And even having done that, often the rules can't be implemented and it takes manual labor to do the calculations to the tune of dozens of hours. So any additions to net metering, we consider to be an overhead that our customers have to pay, and it affects affordability. The other part, you heard a little bit about this from previous witnesses. Net metering, when it first started, there was huge benefits to the utility. That has eroded over time. As net metering and solar development has become saturated, the peaks have moved, and therefore the value of the energy provided has dramatically dropped. And what's not usually obvious to folks is that drop in value doesn't just affect new installations. All of the solar that was installed before also has seen a dramatic drop in the value to the utilities. But the incentives are still there based on the value they were producing at the time they were installed. So as we reach saturation, the cost shift is only increased because we have all of the incentives from the old generation that has to be paid with not the value actually materializing. I was at a local board meeting about a month ago, and their operations department put a graph up that showed statewide there are hours of the day now when Vermont's total load is less than 100 megawatts. because of the generation that's produced here inside the state. So I would argue there's not really a need for incentive to do more in-state generation. The incentives really need to be around how we manage that and use it at the right times. On H716, I'll just state it. We do not believe this bill is necessary. We don't support it. We think the PUC, as Mr. Faber testified, has the authority to look at all of the issues that were raised in the bill. We also agree with the economic development position that the PUC and other utilities have taken. That's not really something that should be on the back of electric ratepayers. I think it's counterproductive. And on the battery provisions, you've heard others say GMP has a very good battery program that's operating. The EC's standing one up. The small municipal utilities this year got a multi-million-dollar grant from the state through the DPS, specifically to implement distributed energy resource management tools and to install in-home batteries in low-income customers. So we're in the process right now, as I speak, of standing up a battery program ourselves, targeted to the low-income customers initially. But the way that grant was structured, the program can't be economic just on those installations. So once we have the tools in place, we have a huge financial incentive to expand that program to other customers. So we're also concerned that this bill could potentially undercut that program and complicate the incentives that we're looking to provide.
Who is that grant from?
It's from the Department of Public Service, but passed through from the Department of Energy, a federal grant. And our share was given through two applications jointly to FEPSA, Burlington Electric Department, and Washington Electric Co-op. We jointly applied, and together I think the combined grants somewhere in the $4 million range to both stand up the software to be able to manage the batteries and install batteries themselves. On the specifics of the language, as I said, section 1, we believe the PUC can do the analysis that's requested within the authority they already have. On section 2, we agree with the EC's testimony. We don't oppose removing the adjusters for consumption truly used just in the home. But in order to calculate that, it's going to have to be an hourly calculation. And as was alluded to, right now, the small municipal utilities do not have hourly metering on their retail customers, so they're not capable of doing that calculation. We are installing in Swanton, advanced metering or hourly metering is just becoming operational in the next month. And most of the VEPSA member utilities are looking to install that metering over the course of this summer. But it's something that's not there today as I'm sitting here. I'd also point out, and back to the billing, adding those type of adjusters is yet another complication that we would have to figure out how to deal with the billing system. On section 3, the battery provision, I stated we're very concerned that having another state program that sits beside our program with different incentive, different structure, I mean, we have a tendency to create multiple offerings that undercut each other. And customers get confused and are trying to figure out where to go for the best benefit here. Every time I sit in this chair, I try to urge you to give the broad policy and let the utilities figure out how to do it in the most economic way possible. So the more specific you get, the more difficult it actually makes our job and potentially slow things down. The language related to third-party virtual power plants is actually extremely troubling to us, because that implies that a third party that's not associated with the utility and potentially doesn't have to coordinate with the utility could be running these programs inside our territories. And so you're having the utility get an incentive for a value that may not actually benefit all customers. So we prefer that language, if you do move forward, that language be removed. And I want to put a finer point on, I think it was Mr. Faber who just testified on the size of the 50 megawatt install. Just want to put some numbers around. I'm an engineer by training, so I tend to dive into the number side of things. 50 megawatts is about 50,000 kilowatts. And I think the bill said that each battery had to be a 10 kW size, which actually is small compared to what an installer or developer would suggest you need. As was stated previously, they tend to propose 2 batteries for a home, which gets you more of 11 to 15 kW capacity. But if we go with the 10 that's in the bill, that's 5,000 batteries installed in homes in Vermont per year in perpetuity. It's a very aggressive goal. If you look at how net metering has been installed, I don't think we've done 5,000 a year. And what hasn't been said previously, this has the potential to create a perverse incentive on the solar side, because the bill requires that these batteries be paired with solar. So in order for the PUC to meet the goal, they would have to set the incentives high enough to do 5,000 batteries per year in Vermont. You may find yourself in a case where there's not enough solar being installed to allow that to happen. So you would simultaneously have to increase the incentives on solar to make sure that you're installing 5,000 net metering projects and 5,000 batteries at the same time, which becomes a major driver of unaffordability in our view. I think I will stop there. Just urge you, we really don't think this bill is ready for prime time. I think the PUC has the authority to do a lot of what you want already, and which they don't have the authority to do. Utilities are already moving forward very rapidly to do, and are getting financial incentives to do so in a number of cases. So we urge you really to think about the higher level policy and let the utilities and the PUC focus on how we do that in the most economical way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. We had a question. Sorry, Representative Howland.
But that 50, the battery installation, the incentive could be to add batteries to existing solar, could pick up some of that.
It could.
50.
Initially, that's true. It's true. But it was stated there's no sunset in this bill. So, and as you reach saturation of things, it gets harder to install and have to incentivize you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, CJ Poor, Public Service Department.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think batting cleanup here is convenient for me today. I think the department is going to echo a number of comments, but maybe provide some emphasis on some that you've heard today. I'll start off just reminding the committee that I agree with, well, some people said it today, but Peter Sterling from REV also testified in this committee that leaving the rates to the experts at the PUC to set is the right course of action. And so I wanted to say that's a area of alignment that we have, and I like to point those out when we have them. I also am, I haven't heard, and I'm glad that I haven't heard any comments from the committee about this bill as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm glad that I haven't heard that, because I actually on the electric side of how we count towards our GWSA requirements, this bill makes no difference, right? Because the res sets the pace of the amount of new renewable energy we'll have in Vermont. But what it does do, and I want to remind folks, is that it actually harms our ability to make progress on greenhouse gas emissions. The extent that it makes electric rates more expensive, that hurts the economic proposition to switch to electric vehicles or heat pumps for everyday customers. And so every time that we're talking about adding cost to electric rates, that is a outcome. And that's not to say we can't add costs ever, but I just want it needs to be a consideration. And so then and the committee needs to think about what is it getting for that cost and what are we getting. I wanted to echo one of the things I was going to comment on. Mr. Faber said it pretty well, that this is a transfer of wealth to net metering customers from people who don't net meter. And a reminder, another reminder, Mr. Sterling testified that these net metering systems cost $27,000. Ms. Morris just mentioned that batteries are another $25,000. So if we're talking over $50,000 investment, I just want everybody to think about who in Vermont is making those kinds of investments. That is not the most vulnerable Vermonters. A small change here is not helping a system pencil out for people who can't afford it. Commenting on kind of incentivizing people to generate and use behind the meter consumption, or offset their behind the meter consumption in every hour. I testified last time that is something that we support. But we need to be sure we're compensating anything that's exported. I think it was suggested that it can't be compensated at zero. I would say we could compensate it at the value. Mr. Kleffner, you brought up the wholesale value of the solar. That is something that the department has proposed in the past, is compensating all exported generation at what it is worth. And so we'd be open to those discussions. That would be a PUC proceeding, I think, to really overhaul the compensation structure for net metering. One of the challenges with this is that we're kind of zeroing in and addressing kind of like trying to address just the behind the meter consumption portion of this, but we have a structure that provides incentives for the behind the meter portion of it and the exported generation portion of it. And so, when people talk about, we've heard it phrased as penalties for your own generation or, the negative adjusters. That's part of the balance with the compensation for excess generation.
Yes.
When I think last time VEC testified, not today, I don't think, but last time that 75% of the generation for solar is exported to the grid, and 25% is maybe it's 73-27 or something like that. That's a really significant number. If that is and really balancing that out, the PUC now balances that out through both, the rate that applies to the behind the meter consumption and the exported. And so if we're just targeting one portion of it, we're disrupting that balance that was established after fact finding testimony on the record under oath in the PUC process. And so I just kind of go back to that's the process to do it. And if we kind of target one little aspect of it, it's going to create an imbalance in a lot of issues. Skip my notes on the tomato analogy.
Thank you. Really.
And I just, Mr. Nolan brought up the issue on storage that I was going to bring up in terms of it encouraging the way it's written now, and it really encourages, you need that much net metering in order to support that much storage. I think that we're around in 2025 around 12 megawatts of net metering for the state. And I would expect 5 to 10 in 2026. Just with a small decline because of the tax credits if nothing changed. But
Sorry, you say that again?
so in 2025, we saw about 12 megawatts. All the numbers, the reports aren't in, but of net metering, in capacity installed. In 2026, I would expect that to drop slightly. But remember, that does not change the amount of total new renewable energy. In fact, we've seen, I have it in the annual energy report slide, but over 50 megawatts of purchase power agreements being filed. So in permitting, a lot of new solar that we would expect to come online in the next couple of years. And so we, there on that point. Just in terms of storage generally, I just wanted to, this is in the presentation I gave on the annual energy report, but in terms of how much storage we already have in Vermont 10% of our 2025 summer peak. So 10%, and that's 19% if you consider what's under construction and in permitting. So almost 20% of our summer peak would be able to be met by storage in the near future, 10% now. And that is, that's about 85 megawatts deployed, and then another 60 to 70 in construction permitting already. Comparing to other states, we have Massachusetts. It's 3.9% of their summer peak. Maine is 3.2% of their summer peak. Connecticut is 0.6% of their summer peak. Right? They all have these goals in statute that we are exceeding what their goal is for the future already with the way our the incentives, our electric utilities have least cost planning, and what we're enabling further with grants that we've given to smaller utilities to encourage the management systems to keep that going and have them kind of join some of the larger utilities providing these options. And so we're pushing, we don't, I would argue we don't need anything in statute to continue our really, really good and region leading progress on storage. So I'll just circle back to the compensation and the whole, a wholesale review of net metering and really what its place is in the picture. I think we're open for that. Imagine that being a topic for the energy plan coming up, and to have processes up going forward to address that. And have public processes to gather input and understanding technical analysis on what that means. But really just targeting one piece of the puzzle here is problematic and will have unintended consequences, or I think they're unintended, of increasing rate pressure for everybody and making it harder to meet our greenhouse gas reductions.
So,
Do you know the total amount of capacity of net metering and the total capacity of solar, whether or not the total solar includes the solar net metering?
It is in the annual energy report, which you all have. My battery died on my computer. I'll be able to pull that up.
Plus 12.
But I believe it's over 400 megawatts of net metered solar and over 600 megawatts of solar altogether. So I would point you back to the annual energy report.
I remember 350, but. At 12 for 2025.
Well, that's just net meter, the
Right,
12. So,
Right.
yeah, but yeah, maybe it's around 400.
I'm all set.
Okay.
All right. TJ, thanks so much for being here. Just looking ahead to this morning. Alex, did Charlie Baker cancel?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that Catherine could come at 11:30 instead?
I'll send her an email.
Can you ask? Okay, so folks, assuming that we can push our 11:15 testimony to 11:30, I would want to take a break now. I think we have some number of committee members who signed up to pitch some ideas before probes between like 11 and 11:15, so that's actually kind of perfect. And I wanted to pitch TJ. And then I'll just be circling around with committee members to talk, just get some little temp checks on this bill. Between now and 11:30 and or over lunch. Okay. So thanks everybody for being here. We can go off live and